Oh. I see some people joining in. So, hi, good morning, good afternoon. I'll just give a minute or two for more people to join, and then we can start. Okay. This is like making popcorn, so I'm waiting until there's a gap between the kernels, and then we'll start. We'll give it a minute or two, but then we will start, so that we're not feeling in pressure while in the presentation. So I think that we can start nice and easy, and while people join, they can join us. But let's not punish the people who arrived right in time, right? So welcome, and I'll start the slides as well. And I'm really glad that you could join. And if you're seeing this recorded, I'm still glad that you can watch the recording. And a little bit about myself. I'm Ben. I like running. I have 3 kids. I'm from Israel. I'm an avid audiobook listener, and I like to travel. That's about me. I'm also chief scientist for Satori, in charge of the research and other projects in the company. Before that, I was head of research at Imperva. Before that, I was CTO of Skynet. So I come from the cybersecurity space. I'm also co-author of Snowflake Security, the book, and I'm a DataSecOps guy. I've dealt with a lot of data and security positions, and as in the belief that security should be an integrated part of data operations. And here are my contact details in case you have any questions and you're afraid to ask them in this forum, or if you just want to connect. Please send messages along the way. Don't wait until the end of the webinar. If you have any questions, send them. I'll read the questions at the end of the webinar, if we have questions, of course. And worst case, if we don't have enough time, I'll just answer privately. Just before before starting, just want to give a quick check that I'm speaking from the right microphone. Okay, I should have done that before speaking. Okay, so let's start with today's discussion. And today we're going to keep it as light as possible and as fun as possible, hopefully. while discussing data access and access control. We're going to focus on data access, though the access control mentioned can also, the concepts are also viable for other resources like applications, but we're going to focus on data access. We're going to speak a little bit about data access, why it's so important to control access to data in an efficient way, in a good way. And then we're going to talk about RBAC, ABAC, just in time, and then a little bit about Satori and how we tackle the issue of data access control. Okay, so let's start. So moving my image to the side, and let's start with data. Obviously, data is anything I will say about the importance of data to businesses will be, a cliche. It's not only the data-driven companies that are, known for being a data platform are affected by data accessibility and data democratization. All companies are in some way or form data companies. Some are more, some are less, but we see a huge trend in the market of over 75% of the companies that are expanding access to more users within the organization. So that's great. And data is essential to a lot of people, not just a small BI team, but in many companies, it's almost all the teams in the organization and the groups are handling data in some way or another. So data and data access is essential for business growth. And too much access to data or too little access to data can be critical. Give people too much access to data and you're putting yourself in risks. So that can be security risks of data exposure and other security risks. And it can be compliance risks, for example, failing your SOX audit or failing other compliance audits. So giving too much access to data is a problem. And of course, giving too little access to data, and too little can be not enough access to data, and it can be a slow access to data, meaning that you want access to a certain data set and the process takes weeks to get the access to the data, and you're starving your business from competitive advantage. So it's essential to have good access control and let the data flow in an organized way according to your business needs, so that you can have a flow of data, but it is still controlled. And the main concerns around access controls are obviously the two prime suspects are security and compliance. Security, you want to limit access to data because the more access you give to different teams and users in the organization to data, the more risk you have. They're exposed to more sensitive data. And compliance, you need to justify the access to sensitive data, you need to map sensitive data, you need to show who has access to sensitive data, who is using it, and so on. So those are the main players or the main reasons for access control. Of course, there are also other reasons, operational reasons, privacy reasons, and so on. But I think that the most important, if we get to the bottom line, the most important reason why a business should have good access control that gives access control in a timely manner and gives access control in a secure way is to actually get value from data, because eventually risk catches up with the business, and then it just slows you down significantly. So if you want to have a good data culture in your organization, for example, if you want to have a good data sharing culture, you need to have an organized data access control where it's controlled yet and secure, but people can get the data in a fast way. And again, the best example, as I was saying, is in a data sharing culture where you want many people to get access to data. You need to have a robust access control management to share the data while retaining access control. And with regards to data sharing, we can, and there's a lot of ways to think about it, but you can divide companies to three mindsets, and those are, in some companies, what we are seeing is a default to know mindset around sharing data, which means that people get more access than they actually need. And in many cases, there are drivers to change that, and to change from default to know to other data sharing mindsets because of forcing reasons like acquisitions and like business transformations. A lot of businesses choose to move to a need to know basis to allow people to access data according to their role, according to their need, but by default not to have access to data, especially sensitive data. But there is a growing mindset in businesses of a need to share or a share first mentality, where the default in the organizations is to share data between different teams, and the objective of security teams and of data teams is to allow this data sharing while retaining security. So this need to share is driven by business use. According to Gartner, for example, data sharing is a business necessity. And if you want, you can read more in the Gartner data sharing, in the Gartner CDAO report. And though this sharing culture is needed for the business, it's pretty hard. We performed a survey a few months ago, and we found out that that most data leaders are dealing with data that contains PII, personal identifiable information, and more has other types of sensitive data, while 62% says that security and compliance are slowing down their data operations. So there is a problem to enable a good sharing with while retaining data access control that is effective. And I've been on this before as well. You know, it's I've seen this problem as a data owner myself. So this is I can identify myself with this problem back when I was a data owner. Okay, so let's go back to the topic of access control, and let's discuss some types of access control. So role-based access control. In role-based access control, data access is based on roles. That is usually the case where you connect to your data warehouses, databases, and then they are integrated with your identity provider, or sometimes the connection needs to be done in a manual way, but using this integration, for example, using SCIM, you get the identity groups of the user, and you can set a mapping of those groups as the roles of the user. So for example, if I am from research and in my identity provider I'm from research, I will get the role of research within my data warehouse, for example, and that will give me a certain set of data that I can access. And if I need other data sets, I will get other roles. I can use other roles in parallel to get access to different data sets. So this is more or less role-based access control, and it provides a lot of scalability and at scale when deployed over the option of manually setting access per user, which is why it's in wide use. However, what some of the challenges that are being that affect role-based access control implementations, in many cases there are many exceptions. So, for example, I'm a data analyst and I need access to a data set that belongs to a certain group of marketing, and when I need that data set, there is the decision, okay, so do I go to the identity management team and add myself to that group, or do or do we create a custom group, custom role just for that, or do we add authorization to the data for my data analyst role? And sometimes those things create too many exceptions and what's called a role explosion. So that's one of the issues. Sometimes it's not granular enough. So you want to have other means to use in addition to role-based access control, other attributes to use. For example, I'm a support engineer, and we want the policy to be that I can connect to certain data sets, but I can only do that when a certain attribute is met. For example, when it's my time shift. So that's another thing, and in many cases, it's a matter of like the first thing that I discussed is also a data bureaucracy where I need to go through several teams to get access to data. The second is attribute-based access control, ABAC, or policy-based access control, PBAC, where access to data is based on attributes or a policy that is determined by attributes. So one of the examples. Sorry, I switched the slide. So some of the examples, as I was saying, I'm a support engineer and I need access, but I want it to be only during my shift, or I want to give access based on attributes imported from the identity provider. For example, not just by the role, but I want to give access to Ben, who's now in a German team, or he's in a team and he's located in Germany. We want to give Ben only access to data of German customers, and this is not a role in the identity provider, it's a different attribute in the identity provider. And this can be, there are other examples, of course, but such a data localization example is one of the examples. The context, the connection of the context, I want to give someone access only when it's their time shift, like I mentioned before, or I'm an analyst, and one of the attributes is what I am connecting through. So I can connect to the data using Tableau, but not using Python, because we don't want the analysts to connect using Python. So setting different connections, different network attributes, like for example, I can connect, but I can't connect to the sensitive data when I'm connected from a public network, but I can connect to other data from a public network. And one more is the types of data. So for example, I can connect to the data, but I can't view certain types of data. So for example, I can't see PII or PHI, so that's other attributes. The main complexity around the ABAC is the implementation. Some of the attributes are supported by the data stores, some of them are not. So for example, setting the connection by the attribute of data types. Do we have that option or not? Sometimes we have that option, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we can create that option by adding functions and views to our database. And some of it is hard to understand later in the audits as well, in the data access audits as well. Third thing, which we see more and more in organizations, is just-in-time access, or it's organization that either build or uses products to give and take and revoke access as needed. So let's give a couple of examples for that. Let's give a couple of examples of just-in-time access. So one classic example is there's a production database. You don't want to give engineers access to the database all time, but you do want to give them a break glass option process, so that if they the business justification, they can, and since you want to limit the access, but you want to allow people to access using a simple approval process, get access to data, so they will not be able to access everything in an uncontrolled way, but if they specify a business reason, they can access some of the data. So it's used mainly for temporary data access and for risk reduction. So the main problem around just-in-time is that you need to set up a process around that, and in most cases you need to set up some sort of an application around that. That application can be a homegrown application, it can be a product. Obviously, I will share a little bit about what Satori does around that later, but you want to have some sort of a data marketplace or a wrapper around the access control of the actual data to enable people to log into a system, request access to data, and get access to data. And then what happens behind the scenes is either an automated process creates the access control on the database, allows you access on the database, or you're given access in another method. So this is one of the complexity. Another part of the complexity is when you have different data of different types, especially different technologies, this becomes more complicated to achieve, obviously, because sometimes it's different methods to give access in different places, and the whole process becomes more complex. So basically, basically the three RBAC, ABAC, just in time is not they're not mutually exclusive, and in many cases they're used you know, a couple of them or the three of them are used together. So in many cases there is some sort of a constant data access that is provided by role-based access control. Maybe it's also augmented by attribute-based access control, and in many cases it's the 80% of access that is needed in an ad hoc way. This can be done by such a just-in-time access control management, and basically just-in-time data access complements, I would say, RBAC and ABAC when they are not enough, in order to give automated access control and the temporary access control to data for the cases where you need ad hoc data, you need data for a specific amount of time, you need to create a report, or you need to work on a project that will take you a month or a week or a day, but you don't want to give people access and have them stay with that access for the rest of their lives in the organization, creating an overprivileged access in your databases and create a security risk. As I was saying, just-in-time access control can be implemented in-house, so they can be written, and in many companies there's to some extent some sort of automation around access control. So it can be connected to a ticketing system, it can be standalone, but you go into a system and you get access to data. Sometimes it's really pinpointed that specific data. Sometimes it's connected to a data portal or a data marketplace where you can get that data. And what happens behind the scene is that, again, it connects to the database using an administrator account, and it gives you the access that you need to get. And afterwards, it connects to the database and revokes your access. There are also orchestration tools doing that as well. And then there is Satori, of course. And we take a slightly different approach to access control and to just-in-time access in general. And let's talk a little bit about what we do at Satori around data access control. So basically, Satori is a cloud service, and we are identity and data aware. So that means that we are sitting between the data consumers and the data, and we're also integrated with the identity provider. So we know both about the identity context of the users that is requesting the data, and we know about the data itself. We continuously classify it and detect sensitive data in it. So we know what types of data are in which locations in all of your data stores, databases, data warehouses, data lakes. And we dynamically manage access, or you use Satori to dynamically manage access to data across all the data stores. So we are sitting in between, and then you do not need to change anything in your queries or in the data stores themselves. We do not touch the data stores themselves, but we perform access control as a proxy on the way from the data consumer to the data. And basically what we enable is to we enable data teams to get authorization to data in a fast way without adding any SQL code or without setting any access manually, using API, UI, or Terraform, and automating the whole access control process and getting a visibility of all your data access in one central location. So as an example, when a user requires self-service access to a data set, they log into the organization data portal. They say, I need access to that specific data set. And according to the configuration, if they should get automated access, they can get it. If they need to go through a workflow, an approval workflow, and that also works as well. And in most cases, there's also a security policy applied that dynamically masks sensitive data according to the identity of the user and the data that is being accessed. Or when there's a temporary access requirement, access to data requirement, the person who needs access at 3 a.m. can can request access, and either get it automatically because that is how you configure it, or get authorization using the data portal, or using the Slack integration, or using a ticketing integration, and get access to the data. And again, everything is audited, and security policies that are applied, and so on. So that's a little bit about how we do, how we apply those just-in-time data access. So basically, that's about that. I kept it pretty short. Tried to cover both, the access control, the need to access control from a point of data sharing, and the trend leading to that, and what we do at Satori. Hope it was a nice blend for you. And if it wasn't, let me know, and we can fill the gaps on what was missing. Next webinar in 2 weeks. Which is also my birthday, by the way. We're going to have a webinar with Eldad and Ty with the live demo of frictionless data access control, which is going to be pretty cool. So you can register to that. You will get the link as well. And next week, it's party time, as some of us are going to Big Data London, one of the big data events of the year, and we're going to have fun. We also have a panel in there in the first evening with our friends from Rivery, Snowflake, ThoughtSpot, Late, and SQL DBM, and I hope I didn't forget anyone. So please, if you're there, drop us a visit. And now, before I will ask if there are any questions, here are my contact details again for any questions, comments, suggestions, and so on. And if you want to learn more about Satori, you can visit Satori. You can go directly to the product page, or just go to the homepage, or you can book a demo using this link, or just go to the website and click and get a link. You can also get a test drive account and try Satori for yourself. So I will stop sharing now, and I will see if we have any questions. Any questions at all? And you can also write down any questions if you have them, and let's see. So you can send them the private message or whatever the Zoom way is. So, sorry, I moved away from my Zoom screen. So, sorry. Okay. Oh, here, there's Q&A. So regarding technical architecture patterns, so again, I don't know if you wrote it before I was discussing the actual access control patterns, but feel free to contact me, okay? And we also have some more informational guide around access control on our website. Up on the menu, it's resources, then access control, or feel free to email me or LinkedIn or whatever, and let's talk. So then there's a question. Oh, okay. I saw just the statement, not the question. There are so many kinds of data privacy regulations like PII, SPII, CSI, GDPR, country specific, and more and more. How do you ask the customer to define their business case? Okay, so that's a great question. In many cases, the organization needs to set up a team of teams, as we used to say when I was in bigger companies, that consists of people from privacy, like the DPO, governance, and compliance and security, and figure this out. In most cases, and again, I'm not a privacy expert, but I've spoken with quite a few, and in most cases, it consolidates. So it's not like there's a totally different definition of PII for GDPR and then for CCPA. And from there, you need to understand the requirements that you have as a business, which also require, and also from my career history, I remember some of the requirements were also contractual, so they were not regulation driven, they were contract driven, as in customers were having specific requirements. For example, the user ID cannot be shared without being hashed or masked, and so on. So in most cases, it needs to be some sort of a team of teams that does that. But once they do, they should reach a policy that is as clear as possible and as deterministic as possible. So there's no need on the other end to figure it out each time, right? You need to have that figured out what the requirements are, and sometimes it's different according to different data sets and so on. But then once you have it figured out, you need to have it very clear so you can set a policy that the policy itself will not take time to, okay, let's understand if analysts can or cannot access this data. This should be as automated as possible, and I hope that makes sense. And again, feel free to contact me if you want to discuss it further. So let's see what other questions we have here. What about to break my teeth? What about row-based access control? How does that fit in? So row-based access control or row-level security, as in ROW. Sorry, English is not my native language, and I'm saying the two words the same maybe, but ROW, row-based security or row-based access control, means that you have tables of data in the conceptual sense, because it can also be data that is not in tables. But let's say it's a table, and it's a table of customers, and the customers are from different regions. So there's a column called region, and then it's the name of the country or the name of the region, and only European agents can see data of European customers, as a simple example. So row-based security means that you set a policy that allows people to access only specific rows of data from the same table. So if a US rep queries the data, they will get all the US customers, and if a EU rep queries the data, they will get the EU data, and it can fit into the different types of access control. So it can be based on the role, it can be based on attributes, like if my country in my IDP is Germany, I will see only German customers, and so on. So that is about row-based access control and how it connects to anything. What else? What else? Do we have any other questions? How does Satori provide role-based access control on databases that don't have role-based access control support. So Satori, as I was saying, it's a proxy. It sits between the data consumer and the database. It gets the identity context of the user, and then it can apply whatever access control you want it to apply. It applies it in transit. It applies it as a proxy. So it is not limited by the native capabilities of the database. Next question is, what book are you currently listening to? Which is, I said that I was listening to a lot of audiobooks in the beginning. So currently I'm listening to Stephen King's Fairy Tale. So if that's not related to data. Okay, so that's it for this webinar. I'm hoping you enjoyed, and feel free to contact me on the contact details that I gave before. And other than that, have a great Wednesday and great rest of the week. Cheers, bye-bye.